I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. I really hope you're able to take a big relaxing breath tonight because it's Friday night. Maybe you have plans to go for a drive this weekend. Maybe you'll even take your electric car or hybrid out for a spin, or maybe you'll think about buying one. If you are, either way, you're going to want to pay attention to this. There's a program called ORGO that the state thinks is the future of paying for our roads. It very much involves those of you who drive electric and hybrid vehicles. It is our big story. We've been talking about ORGO the last couple of nights. The state of Oregon thinks it is a solution to the dwindling gas tax revenues. As more of you get hybrids and electric vehicles, you pay less gas and you pay less gas tax, which means that's good for you, but it's not great for the state of Oregon, especially the Department of Transportation. This ORGO program would do away with the gas tax for cars and trucks that get more than 40 miles per gallon and electric vehicles. Instead, you would pay a fee for every mile that you drive. Now, slow down before your blood pressure shoots through the roof. Relax. It's not mandatory yet. And there are incentives that could actually save you some money compared to paying the gas tax, at least initially. And while it's a program that is gaining traction nationally, there are apparently growing pains with the Oregon plan. For example, one of our viewers, Brad, saw our earlier stories this week and decided, why not? I'll sign up on ORGO, and then ran into trouble. Here's what he wrote to us. When I went to sign up, there were only 2 of the 3 platforms I could choose to register an electric vehicle. The first one I tried told me my VIN number was wrong, although I checked it to be sure more than once. Having failed there, I went to the other platform that told me my license plate was invalid. Neither could complete the registration with the information I supplied, so I had no choice but to give up. Oh man, sorry about that, Brad. That is nuts. I'm going to email you the contact information for the state person who's doing outreach for ORGO so that she can help you fix that problem. All right, Oregon started working on this about 20 years ago, but it's getting more serious now with all the electric vehicles in our state. And by the way, Brad is not the only one running into issues. Yesterday, I was talking with the state treasurer, Tobias Reed, who also owns an electric car and a hybrid.
The electric car that we have started as a lease, and the way the ORGO works, you have to plug in a dongle that accounts for the miles. Well, the electric car that we have has this port behind a vinyl door that opens, and the dongle won't fit in that unless you cut the vinyl off, which I didn't want to do, it being a leased car. So the electric car is not participating in ORGO, but our gas car is, because I could get to that dongle. So it's just a matter of where the manufacturers are not yet talking to the policymakers. That will synchronize in future years, I'm sure. But that's
yeah, probably, but kind of a pain in the neck in the meantime. By the way, he's a big believer in electric vehicles and this ORGO program in particular. In fact, when he was a state lawmaker, he was the chair of the House Committee on Transportation. So he studied the issue of declining gas tax and has heard arguments against a per mile tax from you folks who live in rural parts of Oregon. Some of you worry that it will tax you more because you're going to drive farther. But he said that's really not the case. You're already paying more in gas tax now, so it'll kind of all work out. The registration fee, by the way, for an electric vehicle in Multnomah County is $428 compared to $248 for a gas vehicle that gets 20 to 39 miles per gallon. So if you do this ORGO program, you could save a little bit of money. If you do if you have an electric car, you're not going to pay that $300. It's much lower. So while there are growing pains, the state treasurer says the per mile tax is essential for Oregon's future.
Well, I think you have to have a mechanism for vehicles and drivers to contribute to transportation infrastructure. And if the car is not using gas, the gas tax is not the way to do it.
But doesn't it fight the rebates and the incentives to buy the electric car in the first place?
Not necessarily, because all this conversation we've had so far has not had any mention of what the rate is. So you could have a rate that is less for an electric car than you're paying in a gas tax. You could create incentives around when and where you drive. It's a flexible platform.
Okay. And actually, as you say that, I mean, I think the proposed one right now is 2 cents a mile. And the gas tax for the state level anyway is 38 cents a mile. So it's already there.
That's a significant difference, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, it is. See how good I am at math? Oregon's electric vehicle dashboard, by the way, shows nearly 55,000 zero-emission vehicles in the state as of October. The most, more than 15,000, are in Multnomah County. Washington County has second place, more than 11,000. Now, let's get to a story that we teased you with yesterday concerning tolls. Oh, yes, we do love talking about tolls. Tolls for the new I-5 bridge between Portland and Vancouver. Now, we've been telling you for months to expect tolls on the new bridge once it's built. But last night, we found out that there are plans to put tolls on the old bridges while construction is underway on the new ones. And our team only found that out because of some good old-fashioned journalism. Anthony Masuk, a digital reporter for our team who's been following the bridge project for years, noticed a funding change in a new report that we told you about last night, showing the price tag for the project was increased from an estimated $4 billion to around $6 billion. Big chunk. Basically, a report from 2020 said the new bridge would collect between $850 million and $1.3 billion in toll revenue. But a fact sheet for the new estimated cost of the project showed toll revenue between $1.25 billion and $1.6 billion. Anthony is a very sharp guy. He thought that was curious. He interviewed the administrator of the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, who said they didn't know yet how much tolls will be, but their placeholder numbers are between $2 and $4. And those numbers had not changed between the 2020 report and the new fact sheet. And that simply did not add up. If the revenue went up, but the toll amount had not changed, what did change? Something. Where was the extra $300 million coming from? So Anthony started sleuthing, looking for an explanation. It turned out the answer was not in the fact sheet for the new report, but in the original report from 2020. That report assumed the tolling would not start until the new bridge was up and running. Makes sense. You're now paying for a new bridge that you're crossing. But it also said that if tolling started on the old bridges while the new one was still being built, well, that would rake in some extra tolling bucks. How much more? Well, according to that 2020 report, up to, wait for it, $300 million. So Anthony contacted the project office asking if that was indeed the plan, to put tolls on the old bridge during the construction. And guess what? Yes, that is exactly the plan. That's what the new financial assumes. Their term for it is pre-completion tolling, which hopefully makes you feel better. So yes, you could be paying for a new bridge for potentially years before you're actually able to drive on it. Now, we don't know when those tolls would start, but construction on the new bridge is slated to begin in late 2025, so they could be installed around then. Be ready. You heard it here first. And you had strong views concerning the impending tolls over the Columbia, but let's get to some of your comments here. We got one from a business owner who said he'll be forced to raise his prices in order to cover the tolling cost to his operation.
Hello, my name is Mike, and I own a local plumbing business that a lot of people in both Vancouver and Portland use. And the thought that they're just going to tax the people driving across the bridge is asinine, and people should not buy into it. If we as a business get charged every time that we have to drive back and forth across the bridge, then those rates go up to everybody that we're doing work for.
Well, that sounds like fun. Another viewer said she won't mind the tolls as long as the new bridge helps her feel safer when driving high above the river.
Hi, my name is Cindy, and I live in Vancouver, and I just saw the story about the Columbia River crossing, about a new bridge. And I don't care if I have to pay a toll to go back and forth because I just want a new bridge. Please let me have one before I die. I don't want to have to keep holding my breath every time I go across the old bridge, hoping there's not an earthquake and that I fall into the Columbia River.
Valid concern. Cross our fingers. But the rest of you took a different approach, not totally for tolls, but really not railing against them either. We'll call this the deal with it viewpoint. Mike says, cry and whine. We need a new bridge. We all need it, and we all have to pay for it. A toll must be a portion of the cost recovery. This is part of being a member of our collective society. Get used to it. The alternative of not replacing the bridge simply is not a solution. And Cheryl agrees, writing, grow up, folks. You want all sorts of services, but you don't want to pay for it. You can't get something for nothing. A few of you Oregonians are pleased that people from Washington will have to start coughing up money for Oregon's bank account. Dean says, love the idea of charging Washington folks to come visit. I come from a state where you pay for the bridges you cross. Not rocket science. I have always believed that Washington folks should just stay and pay the sales tax rather than wearing out my roads and making me stand in long lines at stores because they just come over for free. I think that's a sales tax comment. And Peggy went on, all these Vancouverites who have driven over that bridge to purchase products free from tax ought to think about how much money Oregon has saved them. A lot of strong comments there. Well, what do you think about all this? Do you agree with those viewpoints that we just shared or not? Whatever, send us your thoughts or alternatives. You can send us an email. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or you can leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Switching now to politics, these are the final days in office for this lady, Oregon Governor Kate Brown. In fact, this is our very last show with her in office. Tina Kotek will be sworn in Monday afternoon. Kate Brown stepped in 7 years ago when John Kitzhaber, then the governor, resigned just after beginning his 4th term. It is true that Oregon governors can only serve 2 terms in a row. Kitzhaber did that, then sat out for a while, and then ran again and was easily elected. But after finishing Kitzhaber's term, Kate Brown was then elected to a full 4-year term. She faced enormous challenges during her time in office, from devastating wildfires, nightly riots in Portland, and of course the COVID pandemic. I talked with the governor about those topics and others, and you can watch our hour-long interview right now. It's on our KGW YouTube channel. For this show, I thought we'd take a look at the final 2 minutes of our interview, where we talk about what it's like to wind down after such an intense time in office.
I'm really proud that I've had this opportunity to lead Oregon through one of the most difficult times, and I'm really grateful that the voters of Oregon have given me this chance. It's been a true honor and a privilege.
All right, what's next for you? Do you have time for that?
What's next for me? I know this won't surprise you, but Dan and I are going to take a vacation, and then I'll come back and figure out what the next chapter is. I honestly hope that I will continue in public service in some way, shape, or form, but I don't know what that looks like yet.
Gonna take a big sigh? Just
Governor Sandoval, who was former governor of Nevada, he said, this is like wearing a 50-pound flak jacket and you have it on all the time. I'll be taking off that flak jacket on January 9th at about noon. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to use the Barbara Roberts quote as well about the feather duster.
That is actually Governor Atiyah's quote, but she uses it and she attributes it to Governor Atiyah. He says, he said, you arrive on inauguration day a peacock and you leave a feather duster.
Does that feel about right?
I think it'll be about right. I did, Governor Kulongoski said to me, he said, literally, your security detail leaves you and goes to the next governor. And he said, I didn't have a ride home. And I said that to one of my security detail, and he said, oh, Governor, I'll give you a ride home.
That's nice.
Wasn't that sweet?
Very nice, yes.
All right.
We've taken enough of your time.
Okay.
Thank you so much. If we can just have our microphone back, then we'll...
No, you can't. I'm going to keep it forever.
Congrats, Governor Brown, on finishing your time, and have a great vacation. The governor told me that she took up rollerblading at Salem's Minto Brown Park during the pandemic and has kept it up ever since. So when the weather clears anyway, don't be surprised if you see her zipping around the paths there or here in Portland. It was a mistake with tragic consequences for a Clark County deputy chasing a robbery suspect.
Shots fired.
I saw the flashes.
In the chaos, the deputy shot and killed a Vancouver police officer. Now the question, should he face charges? A panel of legal experts is weighing in their opinion when the story returns. It's been nearly a year since a Clark County Sheriff's deputy mistakenly shot and killed an off-duty Vancouver police officer. Daniel Shahada died last February. The deputy who shot him, Jonathan Feller, was chasing a robbery suspect, and they ended up at Shahoda's home. Now, a panel of county prosecutors is weighing in on the incident, trying to decide whether that deputy should be charged with a crime. They have differing opinions on whether the shooting was reasonable under the circumstances. Tim Gordon looked at what they had to say.
This person's now running towards the residence there.
The night of January 29th, 2022 was a tragic one. An off-duty Vancouver police officer shot and killed at his home by a Clark County deputy. That officer mistaken for a robbery suspect on the run.
Shots fired.
I saw the flashes.
Donald Shahada died on the front doorstep of his battleground home at the age of 52. A group of 5 county prosecutors from across Washington looked at the use of deadly force by Clark County Sheriff's Deputy Jonathan Feller and could not agree on whether the shooting was reasonable and whether charges should be brought. In a letter to Clark County Prosecutor Tony Golick, they wrote, "The panel that reviewed the case was unable to reach consensus as to the reasonableness of Deputy Feller's actions under the circumstances." On that fateful night, sheriff's deputies and police had chased an alleged armed robbery suspect named Julio Segura into a rural area in Battleground. Overhead surveillance showed the off-duty Shahada fighting with Segura outside his home. We know the suspect had a knife, and Shahada had his handgun that he dropped after being stabbed in the struggle. You can hear a Portland officer in the surveillance plane warn of the gun as Deputy Feller arrived at the home.
Be careful, that's a gun right there, I think. He just picked it up.
This is a critical point the prosecutors were looking at. We now know it was the suspect who ran into the house where Shahoda's wife was, and Shahada ran back to get the gun. But Feller thinks it's the suspect with the gun now at the front door, and that's when the deputy fired. The panel did consider that 2 battleground police officers close to the scene also thought Shahada was the bad guy. They noted that, like Feller, Officer Nick Syme had his rifle trained on Shahada, whom he believed to be the robbery suspect. In fact, Syme says he was this close to shooting him when Feller fired. The panel went on to write, of course, Deputy Feller's and the battleground officers' mistaken belief was tragically incorrect. And in their letter, the panel of prosecutors acknowledged that some felt Feller should have taken more time to verify the identity of his target, while others concluded it was not unreasonable for him to believe that immediate force was necessary. All did agree on one thing, writing, but for the actions of Mr. Segura, Officer Shahada would not have been shot to death on his own doorstep. But with no unanimous opinion on criminal charges for Deputy Feller, it will be up to Prosecutor Golick to decide, which he tells us he will do in the next 2 weeks. In the meantime, the suspect, Segura, remains in the Clark County Jail facing murder, attempted murder, and other charges over this. That's because the medical examiner determined Shahada would have likely died from his stab wounds if he hadn't been shot. Segura's trial is set to start on April 3rd. Tim Gordon, KGW News.
Thank you, Tim. Oregon's hospitals are in the middle of a crisis, and nurses are on the front lines. When we come back, what they say are the biggest problems they're seeing on the job and how they're working with the Oregon legislature to try and solve them. Over the past few years, we've seen a severe crisis emerge in Oregon's hospital systems. Hospital beds fill up with patients. The hospitals don't have enough staff to care for those patients and nowhere to send them when they're ready for the next phase of care. Tonight on Straight Talk, we're hearing from nurses on the front lines of that battle.
Let's begin with you, Matt, because you represent thousands of nurses. From your perspective, from the nurses' perspective, would you agree with what we heard Becky Holtberg say, that we're in an unprecedented crisis? How would you describe it?
I think it is accurate to say it's unprecedented, but it was not unforeseeable. ONA members have been raising concerns about issues at the bedside, about working conditions for years before the pandemic hit, and then the pandemic exposed vulnerabilities in our system and exacerbated existing problems. And unfortunately, the problems in the healthcare system, they are the burden of the frontline caregivers, and those are the ones that are really feeling a lot of the fatigue and moral injury and distress right now.
And Rachel, how would you describe what's happening?
I share the sentiment. Our healthcare system is broken. It has been for a while. It is why I originally made the decision to run for office, to bring my professional experience to policy. And I think that we really need to look at the systems that are broken and invest upstream in our mental health and our primary care and our public health, because when we're not doing that, those community members end up in the hospital, which is impacting hospital capacity and the nurse workforce and the work on them. So I really think we need to address the entire healthcare system as a whole.
Real ripple effect.
Absolutely.
Representative Noce, you've been in the trenches with nurses, with the ONA. You're also sponsoring legislation that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Well, how would you describe it?
So I agree with my colleagues, and I agree with the Hospital Association. The word has been overused, but it's unprecedented what we're experiencing. And we're also experiencing an unprecedented amount of turnover in this workforce as well, something we've never seen. There's always been a little bit of job dissatisfaction in the 2 decades I've worked around hospitals and nursing, but nothing like this.
Rachel, how is all of this affecting nurses? You're a nurse practitioner.
We're tired. We've been shouldering the burden of our broken healthcare system for a long time. And it's manifesting in this what's called moral injury by some, but depression, exhaustion, anxiety, or then for those of us that take a break, some shame and some guilt for leaving more work on those of our colleagues that stay. And I think we just really need to interrupt that cycle. It's time. The pandemic has shown everyone what those of us that have seen for a long time is there, and now we have an opportunity to fix it.
The Oregon Nurses Association is working with state lawmakers in order to try and find solutions. One of those is House Bill 2697. It mandates that the Oregon Health Authority enforce specific staffing ratios.
Well, first of all, if the law passes, nurses will have some assurance that they're getting the required staff that they believe they need. And then they'll have help from the Oregon Health Authority to enforce the law when it's not being followed or there's concerns in the hospital. And then hopefully that means we staunch the bleed. People stop. They come back to work at the hospital. They want to continue to work there. And it gets out into the public, into the community, that working in a hospital is what we want to do.
And what about these penalties? I mean, that must be something the hospitals aren't too excited about.
I'm sure they're not excited about it, but that's part of the enforcement mechanism that we want to put in place, and so that there is a penalty and an enforcement mechanism. If a hospital for a prolonged period of time doesn't get the staff that they need, there's a mechanism to hold them accountable.
Interesting conversation, and you can check out the whole thing tonight on Straight Talk. That's here on KGW at 7 o'clock and anytime on our KGW YouTube channel Plus and KGW Plus. All right, keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. Have a great week.